You're a good person. You're kind, caring, always willing to help others, always seeing the best in people. So why does your life feel like a revolving door of toxic relationships? Why do narcissists seem to find you across crowded rooms? Why do energy vampires drain you dry while healthy people barely notice you exist? You tell yourself it's bad luck, poor timing, that you just haven't met the right people yet. But if you're honest, there's a pattern here that's impossible to ignore. The same types of people show up in your life over and over again in friendships, romantic relationships, even professional settings. And while everyone tells you to just set better boundaries or trust your gut, Carl Jung understood something much deeper about this pattern. You're not attracting toxic people because you're unlucky or naive. You're attracting them because something in your unconscious mind is calling them toward you. And until you understand what that something is, you'll keep living the same painful patterns no matter how much you try to change your external circumstances. Carl Jung discovered something that revolutionized our understanding of human relationships. We don't just randomly encounter people. We unconsciously attract individuals who mirror our unhealed wounds and unintegrated aspects of ourselves. Jung called this phenomenon psychological projection. We draw toward us the very people who will activate our deepest unconscious patterns. But here's the part that most people miss. Toxic people aren't attracted to your strength or your light. They're attracted to your wounds. Specifically, they're attracted to the parts of yourself that you haven't yet learned to love or protect. Jung understood that the unconscious mind operates like a magnetic field, and unhealed trauma creates a specific frequency that calls certain types of people into your orbit. The narcissist is drawn to your unhealed need for validation. The emotional vampire is attracted to your unresolved guilt and people-pleasing patterns. The unavailable person magnetizes toward your unconscious fear of true intimacy. This isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal what's attracting them. Meet Maria, a 26-year-old social worker whose life reads like a handbook on toxic relationship patterns. Her last 3 romantic relationships were with men who seemed charming at first, but gradually revealed themselves to be emotionally unavailable, manipulative, or outright cruel. Her best friend of 5 years turned out to be a narcissist who used Maria's kindness as emotional dumping ground while never being available when Maria needed support. Even her professional life is complicated by toxic dynamics. She's constantly dealing with colleagues who take credit for her work, or supervisors who pile on responsibilities while offering no recognition. Maria is genuinely confused because she considers herself a good judge of character. She's educated, intuitive, and has read every self-help book about red flags and boundaries, but somehow she keeps finding herself in the same painful patterns. What Maria doesn't realize is that her childhood wounds have created an unconscious template for relationships that draws her toward people who will recreate familiar dynamics. She was raised by a mother who was loving but emotionally unstable, requiring Maria to constantly manage her mother's moods to maintain peace in the household. This taught Maria that love requires constant giving, that her worth depends on being useful to others, and that emotional chaos is normal in close relationship. The roots of Maria's magnetic attraction to toxic people run deeper than her conscious mind can access. From early childhood, she learned to equate love with chaos, care with crisis management, and worth with usefulness. Her nervous system became accustomed to high levels of drama and emotional intensity, making calm, stable people feel boring or even suspicious to her unconscious mind. Jung would recognize this as a classic case of trauma bonding, where the familiar patterns of dysfunction feel safer than the unknown territory of healthy relationship dynamics. Maria's unconscious mind doesn't trust easy love because easy love wasn't part of her early programming. She learned that relationships require constant work, constant vigilance, constant emotional labor. So when healthy people show up in her life offering consistent kindness without drama, her unconscious mind rejects them as inauthentic or temporary. Meanwhile, when toxic people appear with their familiar mix of charm and chaos, her unconscious mind recognizes the pattern as home. This isn't conscious choice, it's unconscious programming running automatically in the background. drawing her toward what feels familiar rather than what feels healthy. Jung identified the specific mechanism behind this pattern, what he called the wounded child archetype. Combined with unconscious repetition, Maria's inner child is still trying to heal the original wound of having an emotionally unstable parent by recreating similar dynamics with new people, hoping this time she can fix it, this time she can earn stable love through perfect caregiving. Her unconscious mind believes that if she can just love the toxic person enough, give them enough, understand them enough, she can finally prove that she's worthy of love and get the consistent affection she never received as a child. This creates what Jung called a psychological complex, an autonomous pattern in the unconscious that operates independently of conscious will. The complex scans her environment for people who match the original wounding dynamic, then magnetizes her toward them while simultaneously repelling her from healthy individuals who don't fit the familiar template. The tragic irony is that the very people she's trying to heal through her love are incapable of giving her what she needs, which keeps the wound active and the pattern repeating. Her unconscious mind prefers familiar pain to unfamiliar peace because familiar pain feels manageable while unfamiliar peace feels terrifying and unpredictable. Maria's awakening came through a moment of devastating clarity. She had just ended another toxic relationship and found herself immediately attracted to someone at a coffee shop who gave her mixed signals and seemed emotionally unavailable. As she felt herself leaning into the familiar dance of trying to figure him out and win his attention, she suddenly stopped and asked herself a question that changed everything. Why does uncertainty feel like love to me? For the first time, she realized that every person she had ever been deeply attracted to had made her feel uncertain about where she stood, had required her to work for their attention, had kept her in a constant state of proving her worth. The healthy, available people in her life had never activated that same intensity of feeling because they didn't trigger her unconscious need to replay and resolve her childhood wound. In that coffee shop, Maria finally understood that she hadn't been unlucky in love. She had been unconsciously seeking out people who would recreate the emotional dynamics of her childhood. The chaos wasn't happening to her, she was unconsciously co-creating it because chaos felt like home and stability felt like abandonment. Take a moment right now and think honestly about your own relationship patterns. Do you find yourself attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable, dramatic, or require you to constantly prove your worth? When someone treats you with consistent kindness and availability, does it feel boring or suspicious? Do you equate intensity with love, chaos with passion, uncertainty with excitement? And here's the deeper question Jung would ask. What does the pattern of people you attract tell you about the unconscious wounds you might still be carrying? Sometimes we don't realize we're attracting what we're familiar with rather than what we actually want. Share in the comments below without naming names or sharing details that could hurt anyone. What patterns do you notice in the types of people you're drawn to? Your honest reflection might help someone else recognize their own unconscious patterns. Jung's approach to healing this pattern wasn't about learning to spot red flags or building better boundaries, though those skills matter. It was about healing the unconscious wounds that create the magnetic attraction to toxic people in the first place. Maria began therapy focused on what Jung called inner child work, learning to give herself the consistent love and attention she had always sought from others. She started recognizing that her attraction to emotionally unavailable people wasn't love. It was her wounded inner child trying to resolve an old trauma by recreating it with new people. The healing process involved learning to tolerate the discomfort of healthy love, which felt foreign and triggering to her nervous system at first. She had to practice staying present with people who were available and consistent rather than dismissing them as boring. Maria discovered that her true work wasn't learning to avoid toxic people but learning to become so internally secure that toxic people would no longer match her energetic frequency. As she healed her relationship with herself, as she learned to give herself the validation and care she sought from others, something remarkable happened. The toxic people in her life began to feel less attractive while healthy people began to feel more appealing. 2 years later, Maria's life looked completely different, though the change had been gradual and sometimes uncomfortable. She was in her first healthy romantic relationship with someone who was emotionally available, consistent, and genuinely interested in her well-being. At first, this had felt almost boring compared to the intensity of her previous relationships, But she learned to recognize that peace wasn't the absence of love, it was what love actually felt like when it wasn't mixed with trauma. Her friendships had also transformed. She found herself naturally drifting away from friends who created drama and gravitating toward people who were supportive and reciprocal. Even her work relationships improved as she stopped unconsciously attracting colleagues who would take advantage of her people-pleasing tendencies. The most profound change was internal. Maria no longer felt responsible for managing other people's emotions or earning love through perfect caregiving. She had learned to trust that she was worthy of care simply for being herself, not for what she could provide others. This internal shift had changed her energetic frequency so completely that toxic people now felt foreign to her, while healthy people felt like home. Maria's journey reflects a pattern Jung observed across all types of relationships and life experiences. We unconsciously attract not what we consciously want, but what matches our unconscious programming. The person who grew up with critical parents attracts critical partners. The person who learned that love requires sacrifice attracts people who take without giving back. The person who was taught that their needs don't matter attracts people who ignore their boundaries. This isn't about blame or shame, it's about understanding that our unconscious mind creates a magnetic field based on our unhealed wounds and unconscious beliefs about what we deserve. Jung called this the shadow's role in relationships. The parts of ourselves we haven't integrated continue to play out through the people we draw into our lives. The beautiful truth Jung discovered is that once we heal these unconscious patterns, once we integrate the wounded parts of ourselves and learn to give ourselves what we've been seeking from others, our magnetic field changes completely. We begin to attract people who match our healed state rather than our wounded state. The journey of changing your relationship patterns isn't linear or easy. Maria still occasionally feels drawn to people who display familiar red flags, still sometimes finds healthy consistency triggering to her nervous system. The difference now is that she recognizes these feelings as information about her internal state rather than truth about what she should pursue. She's learned that healing isn't about never being triggered again. It's about having the awareness to choose differently when triggers arrive. Jung understood that integration is an ongoing process, not a destination. The wounded parts of ourselves don't disappear. They become integrated allies that help us recognize unhealthy dynamics before we get deeply involved. Maria now uses her sensitivity to emotional chaos as an early warning system rather than a magnet. When she feels that familiar attraction to drama or unavailability, she pauses and asks herself what wound might be activated, what need might be unmet, and how she can address that need directly rather than through another person. Here's what I want you to understand. If you keep attracting toxic people into your life, you're not cursed, unlucky, or fundamentally flawed. You're carrying unconscious wounds that are creating a magnetic field for certain types of people. But once you understand this mechanism, you have the power to heal it. The toxic people in your life aren't there to punish you. They're there to show you what still needs healing within yourself. Every person who has hurt you has also been a teacher, showing you where your boundaries need to be stronger, where your self-love needs to be deeper, where your unconscious patterns need to be brought into the light. Your work isn't to become perfect at spotting red flags or building impenetrable walls around your heart. Your work is to heal the wounds that make you attractive to people who can't love you the way you deserve to be loved. When you learn to give yourself the consistency, validation, and care you've been seeking from others, you'll naturally begin to attract people who can match that energy. If you're ready to stop being a magnet for toxicity and start attracting the love you actually deserve, write in the comments, "I choose healing over familiarity." Let's build a community of people who are committed to breaking generational patterns and creating healthy relationship dynamics. And subscribe if you want to continue exploring Jung's insights into the unconscious patterns that shape our lives, because understanding your psychology is the first step to transforming your reality.